Recording. Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Nina Ha. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the director of the APITA Plus Center. Before my official welcome, I would like to start this evening's program by reciting Virginia Tech's land and acknowledgement and labor recognition. Virginia Tech acknowledges that we live and work on the Tutelo and Monacan people's homeland, and we recognize their continued relationships with their lands and waterways. We further acknowledge that legislation and practices like the Morrill Land Grant College Act of 1862 enabled the Commonwealth of Virginia to finance and found Virginia Tech through the forced removal of Native nations from their lands, both locally and in Western states and territories. Virginia Tech acknowledges that its Blacksburg campus sits partly on land that was previously the site of the Smithfield and Solitude plantations owned by members of the Preston family. Between the 1770s and the 1860s, the Prestons and other local white families that owned parcels of what became Virginia Tech also owned hundreds of enslaved people. Enslaved Black people generated resources that financed Virginia Tech's predecessor institution, the Preston and Olin Institute, and they also worked on the construction of its buildings. So once again, thank you for coming tonight. Welcome to the first of many events for the APITA Heritage Month, which is celebrated in April at Virginia Tech because by May, most of the students have either graduated or left for the summer. The theme for this year's APITA Heritage Month is Expanding the Lens, Reimagining APITA Futures. This month is packed with so many events and programs, which I hope all of you will participate in, especially to understand the significance of APITA contributions as we all usher in a hopeful future. Before I kickstart the celebration for APITM, I would like to acknowledge that support to bring our featured guest for a week-long residency is due to the Anapeasy Initiative Grant from the U.S. Department of Education, the History Department, the Department of Food Studies, the Food Studies program, and the APITA Plus Center. And a big shout out to the librarians at Newman. You all are amazing, really incredible. Now I would like to invite Dr. Helen Schneider from the Department of History, a valued colleague and collaborator. I mean, so thankful for you. And she will actually be introducing our guest speaker.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. So as Dr. Haas said, my name is Helen Schneider. I teach East Asian history here at Virginia Tech. So you might be wondering, what is this random white history professor doing bringing in Eric Kim? I met Eric Kim at the Association for Asian Studies conference last year. It was in Columbus, Ohio, of all random places. And after meeting him only briefly, I invited him to come to Virginia Tech, and very luckily for us, he accepted. So if a friend or your mom dragged you here and you haven't actually heard of Eric, I want to just briefly introduce him for a little context. Eric Kim grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. He graduated from New York University with a degree in English. Then he went on to study for a PhD in Columbia, in American literature at Columbia. Since he left Columbia, he's been a food writer, recipe developer, and editor, contributing work to the Food Network, Saveur, I probably said that wrong, Serious Eats, Epicurious, and Food 52. Since 2020, he's been a New York Times cooking recipe developer and columnist. In videos for the New York Times, he can walk you through recipes in incredibly amazing ways. And these recipes are as varied as Wang Mandu, king dumplings, that he contributed and developed for Dumpling Week, which is for Lunar New Year, gochujang caramel cookies, and mushy peas. Okay, so that just gives you a sense of the breadth. During the pandemic, he moved back home and developed recipes with his mom, Jean. And he created a beautiful cookbook, which I should have in front of me to hold up, but there are some available in the back. You can look back and see them. And a collection of essays called Korean American Food That Tastes Like Home, which was published in 2022. He's in the final phases of putting together a collection of essays in a new book entitled Spaghetti Junction, and you can ask him about the title if he doesn't talk about it this evening. I'll just add on a slightly more personal note, what a real pleasure it has been to get to know Eric this week. Eric came to my class on Tuesday, and I asked them for some words to describe him today during class. Some words that they came up with was funny, personal, insightful, and I'll just add a very authentic human being. I'm sure you will enjoy learning more about him this evening. Please welcome my new best friend, Eric Kim.
Thanks so much, everyone. Okay. Where do I start? I think I just wanted to thank Dr. Helen Schneider for inviting me at all. I'm sort of in a phase of my life where I'm trying to say yes as much as I can and go where the wind blows me, because that usually leads to pretty good results. And my lecture today kind of tells a story of the biggest version of that. Also, thank you, Nina and Teresa, APITA Center. I also wanted to thank the History Department, Food Studies, Virginia Tech in general. All of you have been so lovely. All the professors who have invited me to their classrooms. I had so much fun this week meeting your students. Everyone is so talented and lovely and kind, and you have a very upstanding student body. And as a former English teacher, I feel very happy to have met so many young people who have such bright futures ahead of them. And I think a part of me for a long time had trouble speaking to young people because I was worried about their futures. And it took maybe a good decade, a decade after the story I'm going to tell you, to really be able to see the full picture and to then have some real advice and to know that things will be okay. Okay, so this is a lecture about my biggest failure in life. I kind of feel that young people maybe don't know that it's okay to fail. And I hope this story sort of encourages all of you, whether you're a student or not, to just keep failing. Because I think what happens after the failure is usually something pretty life-changing. So this lecture is called Blue Blazer. When I was 23 years old, I bought myself a navy blue blazer. I thought it'd be too on the nose to wear it for this lecture, so this is not that. But split, water, and dog hair resistant, it was the nicest piece of clothing I'd ever owned. It was also a preemptive toast to myself. I would soon be completing my qualifying exams, or orals. So-called, my colleagues and I joked, because you had to proverbially suck your advisor's dicks to pass. I would be... It's not lost on me the irony that I'm giving this lecture to a bunch of academics. But I promise there's an arc and there's a reason. And I'm not here to, crap on your beautiful school. Okay. I would be tested on the 100 novels I read that year. It made sense that as I moved into this new phase of adulthood, the dissertation phase of my PhD, I would need a statement piece. The morning of my exam, I did my hair just right and wore one of those skinny ties with a clip because that's what was fashionable at the time. I put on my new blue blazer. The previous night, I had skipped the English department's end-of-year party to study and get a good night's rest. I ate at my Lucky Brick Oven Pizza restaurant. They roasted salmon and vegetables, a trio of eggplant, zucchini, and yellow squash in the high heat of that oven, and seasoned everything with little more than salt, pepper, and capers. It was a brain food I ate before big exams. As I got ready for the beginning of this new stage of life, I reminisced about all the English teachers who had helped me get where I was. My college thesis advisor, Josephine Hendon at NYU to start. She's one of the many teachers who encouraged me to write during a time in my life when I didn't even know that I had that skill. I remember the exact place, what she looked like, and the way she said it. In the English department, at the receptionist desk, "You're a strong writer," she said. I'm reminded now of all the other moments of encouragement I got from her. Ooh, sorry. This is like when I first gave this lecture 4 years ago, it was like just like a skeleton of this version. But man, even 4 years, like years later, 4 years later, maybe 3 years later, after working on it and editing it, still just like always keeps coming up. So you're gonna notice that, and I just want you to ignore it. Okay. I'm reminded now of all the other moments of encouragement I got from her, which felt more significant each time because this was a woman who didn't dole out compliments freely, walked into every room draped in black with sunglasses. Each Josephine Hendon move was like butterscotch candy, sweetness tempered by burnt sugar. At the end of the year, I was having trouble coming up with the words to thank her. What do you say to someone who believed in you all year and helped you reach the next level? I bought a massive bouquet of purple lilies, which I had read were associated with royalty, admiration, and accomplishment. They felt appropriate. I sipped a bar of dark chocolate into her mailbox that next week. She wrote to me, "Thank you for the chocolate. I am a devotee." Her emails were sparse but beautifully written. She was an excellent writer herself, which isn't the case for many academics, even in English departments, which is fine. But thanks for laughing. This is great. It's making it much easier. Okay. But Hendon was a novelist, reviewed by Irving Howe and in the company of Michael Cunningham and Susan Orlean. Recently, I reread her book, The Right Thing to Do, and saw why we were so connected, though generations apart. We were both interested in bicultural identity, creative writing, and American fiction from 1900 to 1945. Part of the reason I wanted to do my doctorate at Columbia was that Hendon had gotten her PhD at the school in the 1970s. While researching her life, I learned that she was somewhat of a child prodigy. She went to college at 16 years old, then finished her doctorate in 4 years. She was a Guggenheim Fellow and wrote multiple books of literary criticism. That line doesn't even require an emotional response. I don't get it. Including one on the works of Flannery O'Connor. I love that this Queens native was interested in my South. When I was in elementary school, I went to band camp in Milledgeville, Georgia, O'Connor's hometown. That was where my villain origin story began. I auditioned for the camp on flute, but got second chair. I wasn't proficient technically, but I could really blow. All 7 years, I played flute in Fulton County, Georgia. I always thought it was unfair that being good wasn't good enough. The kids who sounded like shit when they played a solo or anything lyrical were rewarded with first chair just for getting out the right notes. And come concert time, they'd flail and absolutely F it up. Maybe those kids didn't have the right encouragement. I remember my junior year of high school, my favorite teacher, another English teacher, Miss Updike, told the whole class before the advanced placement exam, "There's no reason why all of you can't get a 5, the highest score." Most of us received 5s that year, but the following year in AP Lit, the teacher, Mr. Rowling, all these names are, anonymized, by the way. Mr. Rowling said to all of us before the exam, according to the statistics, one or two of you will get a 5, the rest of you will get a 4, and many of you will get a 3. I think I got a 4 that year because I didn't believe in myself. Obviously, I would go on to become an English PhD student, hell-bent on proving Mr. Rowling and the whole AP industrial complex wrong. It was only a 15-minute walk to campus, but I remember taking a city bus from my 106th Street studio apartment because I didn't want to mess up my new blazer or my perfectly coiffed hair. I knew that I could listen to about 3 Glee songs before I stepped off the bus to walk down the promenade of the college at 116th Street and Broadway toward Amsterdam Avenue and Philosophy Hall, home of the Columbia English Department. One of those cheesy songs called This Time was about graduating high school, but I wouldn't fully understand the words until years later as a 30-year-old PhD dropout. I'm not afraid of moving on and letting go. It's just so hard to say goodbye to what I know. When I got to the exam room, I shook hands with my advisors. Brock, whose 25-year-old son had died in the East River a couple months prior. This was my first time seeing him all semester. Izzy, a poetry guy who made me feel like I was back home in the South. At a kegger he hosted early in my degree, he poked fun at my choice of beer, then Budweiser. And Theodore, my inspirational English teacher that year, and the Nicolas Cage of the Columbia University English Department. We all shook hands and stood around awkwardly waiting for Gosling, the department chair, and my advisor. When Gosling stumbled into the room a few minutes late, everyone's backs straightened. And I really want to stand up. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, that's better. When Gosling stumbled into the room a few minutes late, everyone's backs straightened. There was a Catholic ceremony feel to it. The father had arrived. The altar boys snapped into place. The subject, me, a baby lamb, was to be baptized into the academy, or sacrificed. For the opening introductory rites, Theodore whispered to me, tugging on my new jacket, "Nice threads." One of the advisors asked me the first question, and I froze. Up until that moment, I had gotten A's in all my courses, passed the written portion of my qualifying exams with flying colors, even built up a reputation for teaching popular sections. I don't know what happened, but I couldn't talk. Gosling started laughing at me. Before I knew it, 3 hours had passed, and the exam was over. I left the room so they could deliberate. When I walked back in, Gosling asked the room, "So, who's the main advisor here?" He had asked me that multiple times that year, leading up to the exam. Every time I said the same thing. "You are." As the 3 altar boys shuffled in their seats looking down, Father Gosling looked me in the eye and said, "We're giving you a low pass. I could take the exam at a later date or leave the program with a couple of master's degrees." When I looked to the keepers of my academic career, that room of men, for direction, what do I do? I gathered from their faces that they didn't want me to take the test again. A couple of them made excuses about summer travel plans and busy schedules. Brother Nicolas Cage looked down the entire time. I entered that room in what I thought was my finest armor, only to find that it was just a thin shell. A few minutes later, I was shivering outside the building on Amsterdam Avenue, swimming in a blue blazer that was too big for my small frame. It was a cool spring day. I called my brother Kevin and told him what happened, crying into the phone. It's been almost 10 years since that exam, when everything in my life began to change. Now I'm invited to colleges all the time. I'm always confused by the request to give a lecture and follow up with questions like, why? On what? As a PhD dropout, all but dissertation, ABD, I could deliver an academic close reading of a 20th century American text, one that made me fall in love with social justice and canon formation, made me fall in love with literature and in turn writing. But the funny thing is, no one wants to hear about that, really. What they want me to talk about is my experience as an Asian person in the workplace, how I turned my passion into a career, my life as a creative under the tutelage of Korean immigrant parents, my job as a journalist for a major national newspaper, my internet courtship with the actor Timothy Chalamet. But what I've found most useful and resonant to young people is the story of that exam room, the scene of the greatest failure of my life. Every decision, every move I've made since that moment has been about building myself back up. At the end of my exam, I looked at the 4 English professors, all white and sallow-faced, and everything suddenly clicked for me. I would never belong there. A person gets a handful of those moments of clarity in life, and this was one of mine, a burst of starlight. When I started at Columbia as a 20-year-old in 2015, I was meant to study with an Asian, 2012, fact check, 2012. I was meant to study with an Asian American literature professor, Wen Jin. After reading, that's a real name. You can tell that the real people have their real names and then the bad people don't. But sorry, it's just a story. It's mostly for legal reasons, right? Okay. Wen Jin. After reading incredible texts with her for a year, I watched her walk out of the promenade at Columbia after she was denied tenure, despite her many achievements and publications. Many other talented voices were denied tenure over the years. My Native American literature professor, John Gamber, the one who pulled my application out of the big pile last minute and said, "Hey, what about this guy?" also didn't get tenure. When I first entered the program, I had to ask multiple people why the letters ETHS were next to my name on the list of recent admits. Apparently, it stood for ethnicity. Though I hadn't applied as a race and ethnicity studies admit, that's what they decided to label their only East Asian PhD candidate among a sea of 23 hopefuls. In the series that must not be named, where an English orphan attends magic school to defeat a fascist dictator, the main character, let's call him Barry, finds himself at an impasse. He keeps fainting when confronted with dark hooded figures called Dementors, which feed on happiness, an annoyingly obvious metaphor for depression. In turn, as the narrative would have it, the one thing that can defeat those black demons is a spell, Expecto Patronum, which a wizard or witch can only conjure by thinking of their happiest memory. At the end of this story, what gives Barry the strength to perform that very difficult, advanced piece of magic isn't his own prowess or talent or verve. It's the thought of his best friends, Don and Hermione. Stupid, sorry. The day my debut book, Korean American, came out. The day my debut book, Korean American, came out, my boyfriend at the time, Paolo, was waiting for me with a bouquet of sunflowers. It made me flash back to the day I exited that exam room at Columbia and found my friend Artie holding orchids, ready to congratulate me. And the way she slowly lowered them behind her as she saw my demeanor, the face of a depleted person. But the day my book was released, I got to carry around those sunflowers, my favorite, as I hailed a cab home with my best friend and future husband. That year, I found myself thrust onto stages and television sets. I was on the radio, in the newsroom, at your local bookstore. I took more planes, trains, and cars than I ever had, zipping through road junctures and stalling in traffic jams. I got good at traveling and learned that one can get good at that. I never talked more in my life, losing my voice at various points. And most important, I was finally, officially, a published author. When my book hit the bestsellers list, my apartment had just flooded. My editor called me as I was spending the afternoon soaking up the water with every piece of clothing I owned. The good news didn't sink in until I saw it in the paper a few days later, in all caps at number 7, Korean American. Reading those words made me realize how relieved I was to have called my book that. This wasn't just a win for me. It was a win for anyone else out there who'd never seen themselves in the paper, the magazines, the early 90s music videos on MTV. Anyone who's ever been laughed out of an exam room by a group of white men in proverbial long purple robes. Here's the irony. When I first gave this lecture to a tear-filled room in the Asian American Studies Department at the University of Pennsylvania, one student raised her hand at the end and said, "I too am a recovering Columbia PhD who became a chef." Coincidence, no? And then the head of the department and the Asian American man who invited me to Penn, David Eng, spoke up. I don't want to mimic his voice, but you describe your ultimate failure as an individual failure. but it's a systemic one. Before my advisor, Wen, didn't get tenure at Columbia, David didn't get tenure at Columbia. He told the room. Everyone gasped. The hairs on my skin rose. A few weeks later, for another book talk with the cookbook author Sola El-Waili, I finally decided to wear that navy blue blazer again, the one in which I failed my PhD exam. For years, I kept it preserved in the back of my closet, not on purpose, but because I subconsciously avoided it. It was a bad luck jacket. But that evening, I needed something to wear and had run out of clothes. They had been destroyed by the flood. For the first time in my life, when I dug out the blue blazer and put it on, it fit perfectly. I had gained some weight. There's footage of that talk and me in that jacket somewhere. I walk out onto the stage, giving my fans a presidential wave. 300 booming people are clapping for me, all because I wrote some book. But the real scene is later that evening, at a quiet bar a few blocks away. A cover in the rain. Oh, sorry. All of my favorite people, my agent, my editors, my dear friends, gathered around a long table to celebrate. Nothing in life worth doing is easy. An English teacher once told me that. So I'm glad I tried the hard thing, then went for something even harder. I'm glad I surrounded myself with people who were kind, intelligent, and full of empathy, asked for help when I needed it. No one ever tells you that when you get to the end of the line, after having achieved a dream, you'll want to look to your right and have people there with you. Not people you've taken for granted for years and are just now noticing, but the ones you would invite over for a Last Supper at the end of the world. Those people, who are they? Roasted salmon with summer vegetables, serves two. 2 salmon fillets, preferably skin on and center cut, 6 ounces each. 1 small zucchini, quartered and cut into 2-inch spears. 1 small yellow squash, quartered and cut into 2-inch spears. 1 small Asian eggplant, quartered and cut into 2-inch spears. Extra virgin olive oil, kosher salt and freshly ground up black pepper. Capers and olives, drained for serving. 1. Heat the oven to 450 degrees. 2. On a large sheet pan, toss the salmon, zucchini, squash, and eggplant with some olive oil and season with salt and pepper. Roast until cooked through and slightly charred, 15 to 20 minutes. 3. Serve with capers and olives. Thank you. I think maybe, are we doing Q&A or? Yeah.
Do you mind fielding the question?
No. Do you guys have any questions?
If you have a question, just raise your hand. I'll break the ice.
I'll break the ice with the silly one. So when you say Glee Club soundtrack, is that for the television show or is that a very secret soundtrack known only for people who ever attend Glee Club?
No, it's the TV show. Probably a Leah Michelle song.
What's up?
Hey.
So can you say a bit more about kind of your initial ambitions as a English PhD student, and how do you think that kind of relates to your current ambitions as a writer?
Yeah. One really great thing about trauma recall is you sort of don't know what you've hid in the back of a closet, or you don't know what you've blacked out until you kind of start writing about it and looking to the past. And this collection of essays that's, I'm publishing next year, it's helped me to do that, throughout my 20s. And I think the one thing I noticed was that, well, to first answer your first question, ever since I was maybe in 10th grade, I wanted to be an English professor. I kind of, I like zoomed through college, graduated in 3 years, and then started at Columbia right away. I wasn't like old enough to drink. So I don't know. I think I knew that I wanted a career where I could read and write and just like, I thought be lazy, but yeah. But obviously, I quickly learned that very much not the case. But I now when I look back on, you know, the last 10 years of my life, I was able to see that each career path I tried, the thing that it had in common, the thing that everything had in common was writing. And I think that was really helpful because I don't know that I, you know, came out of high school or college thinking I'm going to be a writer. I just was like, okay, what's a job that I could do? And but all of them required writing and centered writing and like really emphasized the creation of assets that one has to write. So like lectures, or I was trying to be a pop star at one point, so I wrote songs, you know, as a teenager. I was a poet at one point. I have a pen name with a mysterious chapbook that you can find if you look hard enough. And then now it's recipes, I guess. But I also really believe in essays, and I'm excited to publish these essays because I think that's a form of writing that I really like. Yeah, I think that's yeah. I like reading and writing. Still do.
Yeah, great segue to their question on the chat, which is if you could share a little bit more about your new book.
Thanks for asking. It's a collection of essays about the most life-changing moments in my 20s, because I kind of had this. It was really sparked by Korean American. I think when that book came out, I kind of became like my life changed overnight, and there were some things that I didn't handle well, and there were some things I did. But then I think to process all of it, I was able to sort of, you know, collect some of these stories. It's a lot of stories, sort of like this is one of the stories. My first failure. I have one about an ex-boyfriend, my first heartbreak. I have one about a friend dying, my first death. Um, and I just kind of realized that those were the stories that were maybe worth telling and the ones that could maybe teach the most. And so I'm excited because it's a collection of essays that really aren't necessarily about food, but they're kind of about food because food is, you know, part of everything. Each essay does end in a recipe though, so it's sort of it's a Spaghetti Junction sort of refers to a highway system. It's like a design that many cities have. It's like when it's an interchange, so it's like when it looks like this, and I'm sort of writing about like 13 or 14 of those moments. Like, what does it look like narratively if you study the point in the middle when everything's crashing? Because I also really like that type of storytelling. I sort of call it planting a seed and sprouting it later. It's fun when you have a multi-plot, and in the end, it all converges, and it's very satisfying, and it's usually a release valve that I can offer people, and yeah, I think I need to practice talking about it, but I'm excited for it because it's maybe the book that I've always wanted to write ever since moving to New York at 18 years old. It's a New York book as well. Korean American is the Atlanta book, but Spaghetti Junction is the New York book. Yeah.
Hi, Eric. Thank you so much for your lovely talk. That was really amazing. So in preparation for this lecture, I watched a series of YouTube videos, and I kind of wanted to back up to your move to New York and your ambitions to be a Korean pop star. Or I'm sorry, like a pop star. I don't know that I need to qualify it as Korean. But as you said, all of these sort of very different creative endeavors had the underlying foundation that they all had to do with writing. And I was just wondering, do you practice creative promiscuity in your life now?
Oh. Do I? Creative promiscuity. That's what a great phrase. I think I do inherently just by the work that I do. Because recipes remind me of poems. It's like you have to be really concise and quick. So I like the way that, you know, exercises my brain. Cooking itself is a craft that I find myself getting better at each time I go to the stove or go to the cutting board. Um, I don't write songs anymore, but I definitely sing a lot of karaoke. I'm getting married later this year, and it's definitely it's a karaoke wedding. It's at a Korean barbecue restaurant. uh, but I think, and obviously I write like a monthly column for the Times, and I have my book projects, and I also like to help other people with their books, and so yeah, I guess that is, yeah, I think there are a lot of, like, my dream is to turn Spaghetti Junction into a screenplay, and to, like, because yeah, I think I didn't realize it until I wrote the book, and I was like studying my older self, and an older self prior to the Columbia years. I was so, I mean, I'm sure a lot of you have gone through this in your life, and if you haven't, then I highly recommend it. Or maybe I don't. It's really exhausting, but just like realizing where you changed, or for the better and sometimes for the worse. Like I think I lost a lot of self confidence after Columbia, and it was um, it was nice to go back and write about the moments in life when I wasn't um, marred yet, when I wasn't, I don't know, when I didn't have as much self doubt, and because I think my parents sort of raised me pretty, like, artistically. My mom's a ceramicist and she's a cook. Obviously, my dad is good at karaoke. He's not really an artist, but he has a good palette. I don't know. I think, and my brother's actually also an artist, so I think I always was encouraged, which I know is not really a common story for children of immigrants in my generation, but I think all this, it was nice to understand that they're all forms of expression that I like needed as a person, as a creative person. And those songs, they're so cringy, but I was an emotional 13-year-old, so like I had to get it out somehow. I had so many crushes on so many straight boys. So it was nice to look back and see that I just I need to express myself. Right now I'm gardening. It's like for the second year I'm trying tomato plants, and I it's nice to see that there are many ways there are many outlets in the world, and they're all really valid, and you don't have to be a professional to do them. I think of it more as like crafts. They're all crafts that I can get better at if I keep doing them. You know, Writing's the one that pays me the most, but you know.
We're gonna grab one from the chat and then we'll go back to the rooms. We'll just alternate. This one's from Anna. They said, such a lovely human talk. Thank you. I'm curious to hear more about the recipe at the end of the essays, what role they play, how they connect to the heart of each essay. And she says, thanks again. I'm sorry not to be there in person.
That's a great question. I think, I've been writing about food, honestly, not that long. Maybe since 2018 is when I've really, became like a columnist or like a personal essayist, with food and recipes at the end. And I think I've always just so much loved that food was a prompt. And so, to be honest, when I first started this book, Spaghetti Junction, I was very much trying to branch out of food writing, and I was like, this book isn't about food. It's something else. It's in the regular creative nonfiction category or essays. But I realized over time that food isn't just a prompt for me anymore. It's a narrative device, like for storytelling. So, I mean, man, I really felt it just now that the recipe was, like, in each essay, the recipe serves a different purpose for, like, in terms of tone or rhythm or whatever. I think sometimes it's a release valve. Sometimes it's like sometimes you need a little relief from, an end of an essay. Some of the essays are a little intense. Some of the essays, yeah, I don't know. Like the recipes are a fun way to think beyond that final sentence, and what is that recipe going to do for the essay. But also, each essay has a food item. It's like has a dish. So sometimes that dish is more important in the plot than others, but or sometimes it's more stylistic. So I don't know. I think I just wanted to play with that because I thought it'd be really fun. And obviously, it's something that I do every month. I've done every month since I was 28 years old. So I'm 34 now. So it's kind of my bread and butter, and I kind of wanted to play with it because usually at the New York Times, for instance, when I want to be like very weird and creative, my editors thankfully like reel me in. They're kind of like, wait, where's the food? Like the or the food desk. Like this essay is about like something else. Which it can be sometimes, but you know there needs to be food in it because we're the food section. So yeah, it was a just more a prompt for myself to have fun. Yeah, on the page or and try to be more ambitious or something. Yeah. Thanks for that question. That was cool.
Thanks so much for being here.
Yeah.
Have you had an opportunity to talk to the students in Columbia's School of Journalism to kind of thumb your nose at the English department?
No. They've
That
invited.
needs to happen.
I don't know. They've invited me. I've ignored the emails. Maybe someday. Yeah. But I always say yes to other college campuses. One day. Yeah.
So from the Zoom, Ray asks, what was the process of writing your cookbook like?
The cookbook was really emotional. The story's kind of crazy, but everyone's pandemic story is crazy. We went into lockdown in March. I was working at Food 52, and then they laid me off like the week I got my book deal for Korean American. So I was sort of like confused because I was like, oh my God, I've never like lost a job. How do I pay for rent? But also, oh, I have to write a book. That's gonna take a lot of time and effort. And the process was weird because we were going through all of that stuff. But to be honest, the cheesy answer is that because it was such an intense time, so many people were dying, I was thinking about death a lot. I had a lot of people in my life die in my family, and so I was very much aware of mortality and worried about my parents. So I used the excuse of the kimchi chapter to move back home, just to write that chapter. I really thought it would only be a couple months, and then it turned into 9 months. Mostly because her kitchen was so big, and but also the book kind of started to come together. It was really, really exciting it was so genuine, or it was so natural. Just I'm in the kitchen cooking with my mom. We're doing a lot of not trauma recall. I always talk about how like Spaghetti Junction is this trauma recall book, but then Korean American's more nostalgic and really like almost masturbatory, like just really enjoying the like settling into your like I truly wrote it in my high school bedroom, right? It's kind of very strange. But I think a lot of people were going through that, and I'm really grateful for it because the thesis statement of that book was write down your family recipes before it's too late. And I wanted to put that sort of urgency or emotion into it, and it was easy to do because the state of our world basically served that to me on a silver platter. Silver platter? I'm really bad at idioms. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Eric. I wondered if, I mean, obviously the incident that led to your self-doubt was very traumatic, but I also wondered if you could talk about like, has self-doubt also been productive for you in any way? And what does that look like for you? So
Ooh, my immediate answer is no. It's good to have like an inordinate amount of self-confidence. But yeah, I think so because not for production or anything, not for like creative output, but more for like real adult problems. You know, like I had like real, it's kind of like when I was writing songs as a 13-year-old, I hadn't experienced love yet. So those songs were a little flimsy, kind of, they were just little pop songs, but like about crushes. But so I'm really proud of this essay collection because it's about the hardest things that have happened to me. And so the self-doubt is a big character. I call him Evil Eric in the book. And he comes out sometimes. And then it helped me on a journey of kind of just like discovering my mental health stuff. Some of my mood disorders I've always had since I was little. Understanding my depression and my attention issues, and yeah, I think because of that, it gave me a lot of material to write about, but also it was a way for me to continuously self-reflect and sort of try to understand what was happening in my brain because it was really getting in the way of my life, and it was getting in the way of my happiness and my relationship with my partner. So it was yeah, it sucked, but I think self-doubt is probably good for that kind of thing. Also, I think I needed to be knocked down a peg or two, probably. I don't believe in God, but I'm sure he was like, okay, this kid, his hair is too aerodynamic. I need to make it flatter. Yeah.
So one more from the chat here. Thank you for being so brave, sharing such a personal story. It will help so many people. As a recipe developer, how do you build the stamina to keep tasting the food and not becoming numb to the flavor after a while? It seems to me as similar to the difficulty of reading and editing one's own writing, which I have experience with, but I don't know how to work through it in terms of continuous tasting.
It's such a real problem for both things, cooking and writing. Okay. With recipe development, you just get better at it over time. So, in the past, my recipes used to take 5 to 7 times for me to do, and I would really dread it after. Like, wow, every time they give me a chicken package with 3 chicken recipes, I'd never wanted to eat chicken again after that. Like, make me like, but so my relationship with food was very strange for a long time too, until I started to adjust and pivot. And now the things I pitch are really more like recipes I've already lived with for a while. Like I demoed 4 of them on Wednesday. On Wednesday, yesterday. That was yesterday. Wow, time is a circle. And I think it helps to have my partner. Obviously, he tastes, and I love developing recipes at home in Atlanta because then I have like 4 other mouths to, help me with stuff. Because at the New York Times, we don't really have a test kitchen. We kind of everyone develops at home, and I think that results in good recipes because they're realistic. They're home cooking recipes. So, but yeah, I think over time I just got better at pitching things that I knew were already good, and then because it wasn't just for like saving my stomach or my palate or my tongue, because it really recipe development really does it makes your tongue shot. It's like you can't taste anything after a while. But I really enjoy. I always try to like live with the recipe. Sounds so like annoying, but like live with the recipe so that by the time I get to my desk to write about it or to write the column, I can really tell you the ins and outs of it. And people ask annoying questions all the time, and sorry, they're not annoying, but people ask questions all the time about substitutions and all that crap. So I'm able to be like, that doesn't work. I tried it, and oh, I haven't tried that, but let me know how it goes. And then, so it's nice it's also for the reader, because I really hate the idea of people wasting their money on groceries. And so I try to like really know the ins and outs of a recipe before I publish it.
Awesome. I think we have time for 2 more questions. So this is one.
Hi, thanks for coming and for sharing your stories. I was wondering, as like a Korean American growing up in the South, and maybe not always feeling like you belong in a place, have there been times on the opposite scale in Korean places, whether traveling or with extended family, where you didn't feel Korean enough, or how have you kind of found your identity in both spaces?
Yeah.
And also, what's your like most comforting Korean meal?
Ooh, my most comforting Korean meal. This isn't an ad, but I'm actually making it tomorrow. I don't know if it's open to the public though, right? It's the okay, never mind, sorry. But it's egg rice. I can just tell you right now what it is, so you don't have to come to the event. It's a bowl of rice with fried eggs thrown on top, soy sauce, sesame oil. Sometimes people do butter, and like I like to take the roasted seaweed snack that's in the checkout aisle. You just like crush it on top, like a whole pack of it. Just and it wilts, and you mix it all together. Some people do sesame seeds, but I keep mine pretty sparse. The title page of Korean American is basically that, but there's capers because sometimes I don't have kimchi. Or a little acid. But the Korean question is so interesting because I learned so much about Korean Americans after this book came out. And I don't, it was 90% support, people coming to my book talks and crying, which makes me cry. And it was very emotional because I think, and I understand, I understood what the story was, which was when you live your whole life in a country and don't see yourself on the page. So that's why I think that was really meaningful to me. But there's this other side. The 10% is the darker part of the internet, which is a lot of Korean Americans who haven't seen themselves on the page and maybe didn't grow up in more remote areas than Atlanta, which actually happened to be a huge Korean community that I kind of didn't know that or realize that until I wrote my book, until I started like thinking about it and also learning that Korean is the third most spoken language in Georgia and, stuff like that. And then also hearing from other Koreans who didn't have that experience. And also becoming a Times reporter means that you just interview a lot of people. And I got to have a wider view of what the Korean American experience was. And it's so vast. And I realized that I had it easy and I did not have the same identity problems as the other people. I kind of went to a high school that was 40% Asian, 40% Asian. There was a Korean church that I was like I was a praise team leader, cheesy like freshman with a guitar, telling that room to start singing and then that room. So I was just really surrounded by a lot of Koreans, and I also grew up with so many cousins, first and second cousins who were all Korean, obviously, and so I think I didn't feel that I didn't belong in a room of Koreans until I started to have haters in the Korean American community, and it's sort of been a lifelong, or the last 4 years, it's been a journey to really empathize with them and try to understand where they're coming from because it's really sad. It's really dark. It's like the scarcity mindset. I kind of talk about it in Spaghetti Junk. Actually, I think I talk about it in Korean American too, but it's this sad thing of, you think there's only one spot for a Korean person, so you people would lash out. And I didn't understand what was happening at the time, and I thought it had to do with me. And then when I realized it didn't, I think I was able to finally let it go, which is my journey that I need to go on. But I also think it's a universal story. It's like a relatable story. Any marginalized group thinking that they have to compete with each other instead of like the real problem, which is the system. So yeah, thanks.
We have time for one last question.
Thanks. So I really enjoyed your talk, and I'm wondering if you have any thoughts or advice for minoritized students who might be considering PhD programs, could you have known that Columbia was like not the place to go, or is it more systemic where they're all challenging and having skills and a support network to navigate through other things there? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think with more time and distance, like this is like the least bitter version of the lecture you've heard. I think over time, I kind of started to understand that, every department has their problems all over the country, I think. However, I think there is a way to screen and to make sure you're really going where the people are and not where the prestige or the, whatever is. And I probably should have picked Colorado State to go and do an MFA in poetry. Like that time in my life, even Columbia accepted me to their MFA program, but it was the only reason I picked the PhD was because it was free. And so it was kind of like, and I was joking with someone earlier, another PhD dropout. we were joking about how what people should actually do is start a PhD and get their master's degrees and then dip out because then their master's is free. But it's just a joke. As if it's like so easy to get into a PhD program. But I, at the same time though, none of my colleagues, or not none, but so many of my colleagues that in my class didn't even end up in academia. One of them became a trauma therapist. I wonder why. And just kidding. But I think it's I don't know. Like I don't want to. I think my main thing was when I first started that PhD. I was a cheesy, optimistic English major, English teacher. So to my students, I would always be like, "Yeah, you should start an English PhD. It's great. It's free." And like I was really always giving advice from a very, uninformed perspective. and telling everyone that they should do what I did and blah, blah, blah. But then now I know very deeply that everyone's journey is so different, and you really just have to listen to your gut, and you have to follow your own path and have your own failures. And I don't know, you know, what's funny is I thought I was the only one who failed that year. But 3 or 4 other classmates, I think they all passed, but they left anyway. And they're now like successful, like publishing directors and I don't know, whatever, like other careers. And I don't know, I think it's the advice I probably have for people who are considering PhDs is do it because you love the pursuit of knowledge. That's like, I don't really, sorry, I almost said I don't really care where I work. I'm just really grateful that I get to pursue my obsessions and, you know, get to really nerd out about stuff. I mean, I get an assignment for work and, you know, I'm just gonna really like 360 around that, and it's a fun thing to do because like who gets to do that? Who gets to specialize and go that deep? And so, and I'm not just saying this because you guys invited me, but you know, this campus is pretty great. Like you guys have amazing professors. I think the camaraderie, the community feels really deep. I think Columbia didn't have that, or at least I didn't feel connected to any kind of like institutional community. But there does seem to be a real energy here that gives me hope. And I think it's important to just not listen to me and follow your own path. Thank you.
Let's give Eric a quick round of applause. Before we close out, I just wanted to give you a shout out. If you haven't had enough Eric Kim in your life, we got one more chance. So tomorrow, Eric will be joining us at the APITA Plus Center, which is in Squires, 140 Squires. We'll have a learning lunch, so he'll talk more about his story, more chances for Q&A. So this event is open to everybody, so you're welcome to come. We invite everyone to come. There'll be free lunch. We get the hint that there's a lot of free food coming. So we'd love to see you there. And then I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Schneider.
Thank you so much, Eric. That was amazing. I was sorry that I handed you my tissue because I got a little teared up too. But I really appreciate you really putting yourself out there and introducing all of us to your experiences. Now I'm going to pivot to the sort of books. There are books in the back. Eric's going to spend a bit more time with us signing them and certainly can chat more. And there's also plenty of food in the back. So please enjoy. Thank you again so much for coming. It's great to see all of you. And thanks again to Eric.